Hey everybody, how's it going? Nick here. So you might have seen already this video that I posted where I show how to optimize the geometry of this text. So I normally use this for games. So I do the shit and then I import it straight up into Unreal Engine. And then I apply whatever hollow texture or whatever it is. So add a new text. We are gonna I'm just gonna choose a font of my liking because I like this font, which is Nasalization. And I'm just gonna go into edit mode and write down subscribe. So once you have this, you may be tempted to, already from this context menu here to extrude and stuff like that. I would refrain from that. Instead, what we're gonna do, we're just gonna go on F3, convert to mesh. But now what you're gonna see is that we get this whole mess of, like triangles, right? So this is really messy to work with because yes, however, you can, go up and just extrude it, on your own and then shade smooth, sure, and there's gonna be a mess. So you will try to then, apply a subdivision surface on it. It's not gonna work, right? So you may try to bevel it, but you cannot really select shit because, it's triangles everywhere. Like the edge flow is horrible. So what I recommend to do is not to do any of that. Oh, you may also be tempted to perhaps use a remesher. I would not. Instead, there's a very simple solution to this problem. Just go into wireframe and add a decimate. So add a decimate planar and tada. It's already quite good. So what I would do in this case, what I normally do actually, not what I would do, what I do is to decimate triplanar, just like that. Sorry, decimate by planar. I will apply the decimate. And then what I'm gonna do, for example, you see this still has pretty bad connections, right? Like they're not great. If I go bevel this is gonna cause me trouble. So what I'm gonna do, still in edit mode, I'm gonna K for the knife, and I'm gonna go snap it on the Y and just cut it in half, like that. And then what I'm gonna do, by the way, I don't need to be in X-ray mode anymore. I can grab these two and I can merge, or I can just click this and limited dissolve. So this will, like get rid of the edge without getting actually rid of the vertices connecting it. So you can then also grab these and run limited dissolve. And we have a nice clean two-sided mesh here. Why you don't want to really, why you want to have it halved? Because there's two holes in between here. You cannot connect these, right? You cannot get rid of those vertices. If you try, it's going to smash it all together and it's a mess. So that's going to be problematic. And also we're going to see another problem you may run into later when you go export, which is something that a lot of people don't know. There is a sheer obsession for this thing to manually triangulate shit. Really, fucking nobody does this, okay? So what you want to do is, for example, let's say you just go up and extrude that, and then let's say you want to, well, I'm not going to use the plugins, but with hard ops, you would just sharpen and then bevel. Alternatively, you can just go ahead and select sharp edges, and either you mark them as sharp by increasing the mean bevel weight and whatever, and then apply, well, let's do that. So it's gonna be like that, increase in bevel weight, and then you would look for bevel. And here, either you let it run the bevel, and then you run a weighted normal on top. So, and by the way, make it run on something, like if you let it run on angle, let it run on something higher than 30 degrees, like you normally want to watch where it starts to catch. Like see, for example, here the R is being, spliced. It's not, like it's merging it. The weighted normal, by the way, we use it often in games for mid-poly workflow because it's a way to fake that there is a bevel when in fact there isn't. Like if I get rid of the weighted normal, you can see what this is, right? So I would normally shade smooth and then I would weighted normal with a bevel on one segment, and this is what I get. It looks like a bevel, looks like it's very beveled, but there is effectively no bevel. Obviously, you can also go ahead and chamfer, you know, like no one's gonna tell you not to. However, I would be careful with that, because then like you're gonna have to properly mark all of the edges that you need to then be beveled by the actual bevel. And yeah, if you mess that up, it's gonna be a problem. You can also use weight, and in this case I would use weight because, but see, like these are not marked as sharp, so you know they will obviously not bevel. So that's also something to keep in mind, right? So I will have to mark them, you know, and now they will be beveled. Same for these at the bottom. And if you don't bevel stuff with weighted normal, you're gonna get shading problems. So you always have to mark them. Now I'm gonna do it the quick way with hard ops. I mean, to be honest, the quick way is to actually just hit everything and mark. But yeah, you really want to go ahead and do it properly. And then, you know, you can play around with the bevel size, basically, right? So you may wonder, okay, but what about all of these n-gons, right? So actually, let me back out 1 second before I chamfered everything. So what about all these n-gons, right? So that's a good question. These n-gons will collapse. Like if you bring this shit into Unreal, Unreal will automatically triangulate everything, even in Marmoset or whatever, and it will collapse stuff. Also, you might still want to reduce some of this geometry, because it's, you know, depending how big this thing is gonna be, you know, if it's a small one, you might want to reduce it. Like for example, in my project, I have a little ATM machine with a little ATM sign that rotates. That could cause problems, you know, if I mean, not could cause problems, but it's a lot of geometry, you know, so eventually you have enough of this shit, it's gonna cause you trouble. So you could go and do it manually. So there is a way, like you can just go and select one, then skip one, select the next, and then Control Shift, and you keep pressing plus, and you go all around, making sure that you're not selecting any vital edges like these, you know, like any holding edges proper. And then, you know, you would just X and dissolve edges, and like that you can reduce the geometry in a way that is not too bad. The alternative is that you run another decimate, but you gotta be really careful with it, because you can try to unsubdivide. However, you will still get the same kind of problems, right? Look at that. Oh, actually the decimate first, please. So yeah, in this case, it's not really working. You could try to collapse. This will work to some extent. But then again, be really careful. I'm not going to say I prefer to do this manually, because with text, it's so many edges to take care of that no, I cannot be arsed. But this part done manually, you know, will guarantee that you run into the least amount of possible for problems, right? So you'll run into much less problems if you do this manually. However, we're just gonna, you know, like let the decimator do it for us, and this is already not too bad. We could still, you know, go ahead and reduce some, you know, until you start seeing some faceting. Like when you start to seeing the mesh faceting, you might want to stop. But you know, like for example, like this, you still kind of get rid of, right? Maybe, yeah, that can still work. So I would go ahead and keep decimating, you know, like, and keep reducing geometry until I start to see faceting. When I begin seeing faceting, or I begin seeing obvious problems, you know, I will stop. You don't need to be absolutely insane about it, you know, like poly requirement these days is not as strict as it used to be. Even already 15 years ago, something like this would be way more than acceptable. You know, this is fine, right? And about the triangulation problem, right? So we import this, is gonna collapse. So our best bet, it would be to go in and manually triangulate, but it's such a waste of time, it's insane. What I normally do instead, since Unreal will already automatically triangulate whatever I import inside, I just need to give it some guidance. I put in a triangulate modifier on all the meshes that I am exporting that I know will be problematic. You see, I only put it on minimum vertices 5, which means it will only affect n-gons, and that's all you care about. And also, see, you're getting shading problems now. Like, no matter what you do, when you triangulate stuff, you will get shading problems. You fix it by keeping the normals. Like that, you're not gonna get any shading problems. Then, what we can do is we can actually go in, and this is the most important part, we can go and inspect how Blender is gonna export this thing triangulated, because maybe we want it triangulated in a very specific way, and we can give Blender a little bit of guidance on how to do that, okay? So we can give it a little bit of input and tell it, okay, you know what? This, instead of connecting it like the way you're connecting it, like just connect it like that, right? For example. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, normally it does a really good job by itself. It triangulates stuff really well on its own. You don't normally have to give it much input, but in some cases where you would get extremely long triangles, you might want to give it some input. Like, for example, here, this triangulation that it's doing, it's not the worst I've seen, but it's not the greatest either. So I might actually go ahead and, you know, maybe give it a little bit of a nudge in the right direction, right? But yeah, like ideally you want to avoid having like really long or really short triangulations. But yeah, that looks all right. But yeah, so you can give it, see some idea on how to triangulate some stuff, and then the rest will do by itself. You know, once it figures out, it's pretty smart. Like it will figure out like, oh, okay, so you know, it wants this shit be triangulated that way, so I will keep on going with that specific way of triangulation, because well, you don't really leave it much choice, right? You're taking away the choice from Blender in some parts, but the rest, you know, it will do a really good job, and you're gonna have a well triangulated mesh for your game in no time, like this, with a, you know, nicely optimized surface that you can go in at any time and edit, right? Because this is going to be really easy to edit. Yeah, you can literally select the faces if you want, and right, just apply a bevel. Just obviously with the faces, and with this one it won't really work. You will have to select the faces and then deselect the edges, specifically only those that, you know, that Jesus, bro. Okay. Only those that should not be affected, and then, you know, you can go ahead and bevel the thing. Or, you know, in this case, chamfer the thing. But yeah, that's pretty much it, honestly. You can then go ahead and export it as an FBX, and it will work perfectly fine in your gaming engine. Well, everybody, that's basically it. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope the tutorial was helpful, and I will catch you in the next one. Have a good one.